Hi, I'm Michael, and welcome to Beyond the Screenplay, the podcast where each week we do a conversational deep dive analysis into a film. Today we are talking about The Ring, the 2002 film directed by Gore Verbinski, screenplay by Aaron Kruger. It's a remake of the Hideo Nakata 1999 Japanese film Ring based on Koji Suzuki's 1991 novel of the same name. I'm joined today by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
And we're kind of joined by some more people. So to explain, we've been trying out different fun ideas over on our Patreon, like the watch along that we did for Skyfall. And today we are streaming the recording of this episode to our patrons live. So they're going to get the uncensored experience, the full-length pauses as we search for the right words to express ourselves. They're gonna hear it all. Okay, so The Ring. So The Ring, I want to talk. I want to hear from you guys about like the first time you saw it, if you remember, because this movie came out when I was 16, which is like the prime age to be seeing like a horror film like this in the theater. And I remember a lot of my theater experience and the audience reacting to things. I also realized rewatching it that this is like a horror movie for film people in a weird way. And I think that's maybe where some of my fondness of it comes from, is like they're talking about video and time code and like all these things that I was like, oh, I'm a nerd. I know what that means when the numbers are all jumbled. Like that shouldn't be happening. So I just have a lot of fun watching this movie, and I think it was the first Gore Verbinski movie I saw, and I was like, this is just like gorgeous. Like, why is this movie made so well? I'm so into it. It's goofy, it's weird, but it's also terrifying. I was terrified. It's probably the most scared I've ever been in a movie theater. So I have fond memories of being terrified of this movie and loving this movie. But I want to hear from you guys, your first experiences with it. So Alex, do you remember seeing it early on?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, as is weirdly often the case, very similar experience to what you had, Michael. Impressionable. I think I was probably 15 year old. I didn't know much about the movie. I saw the trailer and it looked kind of more interesting than the average B horror movie. Naomi Watts was kind of like a new hot commodity in Hollywood after Mulholland Drive. And so I was interested to see her in a movie. And yeah, I remember going to the theater and seeing it and walking out feeling like it had seeped into me in a way that few movies do. And it was weird because, when the movie started, I got the impression from like the very opening moments, like, oh, okay, this is in a category of like, not like a major film. This is like a fun horror movie with the two girls having the sleepover and there's, urban legends and stuff. So I went into the movie being like, okay, I know what I'm in for. This is going to be just like a typical this kind of movie. But the more the movie went on, that the filmmaking by Gore Verbinski, the music by Hans Zimmer, the cinematography, like it all was so much more than I expected. And it also got into my psyche in a way that's pretty rare. Like I was actually freaking myself out the rest of the week seeing, like I saw a ladder that was like, it was literally the same ladder up against a billboard, and I freaked out. Like this movie, it's like seared those images into my head. A lot of these
thought you saw it.
It seared all these ordinary kind of images into my head and made them terrifying. And so then when I saw them out in the world, I was disturbed, and I was amazed that this movie theater experience could do that to me. So I revisited it over and over again. Of course, I watched it on DVD over and over again, and it was, I think, as formative for me as it was for you, Michael. And I just really admire overall with this movie, from that first viewing experience. It's like, it's a script, it's a concept, it's a remake, it's all these things that shouldn't be this good, but Gore Verbinski just made the hell out of it. And he was like, I am going to make the most beautiful, awesome version of this concept I possibly can, even if it's kind of nonsense at parts, even if the character motivations don't make sense at parts. I can't help that. That's what the script is. But like, look how cool this movie is I made with this concept. So I just have so much admiration for it in that way.
literally cool. It's a very blue and green
Yes.
movie.
I was gonna
also.
say.
It's just like
Rainy, cloudy
color
Seattle.
cast. Right.
Yeah.
There's rain. Oh, there's so much water. We know how I love rain. Cool. Okay. So Trisha, you were around the same age. Tell me about your relationship with The Ring.
So I hate horror movies, and I agree that this movie is genuinely terrifying, and therefore I avoided it like the plague, guarding my own consciousness there. Actually, the first movie horror movie that I tried to see in theaters was a couple years after this. I tried to go see The Exorcism of Emily Rose. And that was the first movie that I walked out of the movie theater where I was like, I don't have to do this to myself. So,
I could just not be here.
Yeah, exactly. And so anyway, speaking of not being here, so then later, it would have been several years after this movie came out, somebody, a friend of mine from college was like, okay, you should watch The Ring because it's actually genuinely a really good movie. And it's a little bit scary, but it's also got this investigative journalism thing going on, and you'll like it. And I'm here to tell you, I did sit down and watch it with that person. I did not like it. And it scared me so much, I got super drunk during the watching of that movie because I was just like, I don't want to be here anymore. And so I peaced out. I drank a lot of wine. And I was, however, that experience is what for some reason persuaded me that I would be okay to watch it now. Because I was like, well, I've seen it before. I was pretty drunk. I don't remember very much of it, but I did live through it one time. I can probably watch it again. Also, I'm in my 30s now. I'm an adult. I'm okay. No, that was such a stupid idea that I let you guys make me watch this. I was so scared. And I have responsibilities and stuff now, and I can't just get drunk. I was watching it in the middle of the day. I also have to podcast about it. Well, I thought this is how drunk I was apparently the first time I watched it. I didn't remember any of it. Wow. I was when I sit down to watch this again, it'll all come back to me and I won't be scared. Nope. None of it came back to me. I was super scared. Also, we have to talk about the edit jump scare in this, which is such a cheating, nasty,
it's the most
kind of a jump scare. It's you edited a jump scare into a nothing scene where there shouldn't be a jump scare. You snakes. Anyway, so this was a terrifying experience. I hated every second of it. And this is what I put myself through for this podcast.
You're welcome.
You're welcome, I guess. It's terrible. No more.
Excellent.
No more.
Great to hear. I thought this was on an approved list. There must have been a miscommunication.
No, it was on an approved list because I was stupid and I thought I had lived through it once and it would all come back to me and I would be fine. And I was not.
Now we know why your brain deleted all of that information.
It deleted the whole thing.
Yeah, well, and the jump scare you're talking about, I'm sure, is the one, in the first 15 minutes where the mom is just they're having a quiet conversation and then it abruptly cuts to the most frightening shot ever of...
I saw her face.
It's the kind of image... Yeah, it's the kind of image that reminds me of in Mulholland Drive, actually, weirdly related again, when the kind of weird garbage man pops out from behind a wall and there's
best
ever.
Horrifying.
There's the most horrifying sound happens at the same time. Same thing here. Out of nowhere, the worst shrunken.
It's probably the worst image in the movie.
Yeah, it's like a face that's been water damaged because I guess they die in the well. Kind of. I don't know. It's the worst, most horrifying face with a shrieking sound out of nowhere, falling forward.
And it's interesting because this movie doesn't have that many scary things about it. There's not a whole lot of scenes where, in a horror slasher movie where it's oh, they're trapped in the room with the killer and how are they going to get out? There's not a ton of that. There is a lot of suspense, but this time I was noticing that they did kind of have to lean on faux jump scares to keep it scary because nothing not that many scary things happen.
There's like loud sound transitions.
Exactly.
You know, it's like
Yeah.
I'm closing this file cabinet so hard.
That one made me angry too. But
Yeah.
I was realizing as I was watching it that this is a PG-13 movie.
Yes.
And it's in the vein of PG-13, like, you know, there are these certain sort of ghost movies, you know, some like demon possession kind of stuff, like just general like haunting things.
The Others.
The Others, which I really like a lot more than this movie. But that's like, again, it's not a slasher movie, so it's not hyper violent. There's not a lot of blood, right? And those kinds of things. And so that's why they can get away with these movies being PG-13. And so like, I think that this movie is way worse than, well, I have nothing worse to compare it to, but I would imagine it's more terrifying than plenty of other R-rated movies that are more violent, right? But this is just, there is something psychological about the way that this, and I would love to get into that, like what it's sort of dwelling on thematically, psychologically, that does make it incept itself into your mind in a really uncomfortable way.
For sure. Yeah, let's definitely get into that. But first, Brian, tell us about your first experience with The Ring.
Yeah, I watched it back in probably 03 or 4, somewhere in, you know, shortly after it had come out. And I was excited because people were like, it is the scariest movie ever. Like it terrified me and everything. And I'm like, I like the feeling of a sort of controlled scare. You know, I don't want to be scared when I literally have no idea what's going on, but just sort of like, I know I'm in a safe environment. Do your worst, scare me. And so rarely a movie is actually able to do that. Mulholland Drive gets away with it because it's like it builds up so much to that moment that you think it's not going to happen. So when it does happen, you're not ready for it, you know. And some movies I've been able to do it. There's a really good it's like an old YouTube video or pre-YouTube even, and it says like if there's like a car going through a country road basically, and it's way in the distance, and it says if you look close enough, you'll see a ghost, and then you're looking and you're looking and then like a zombie jumps up right in your face, and it's like great because you did a thing with expectation, like the closet cut in The Ring. And I watched it and it was fine. It didn't scare me that much. I'm not saying I didn't get like a little ooh from some jump scares, but I didn't have the really tense, horrified feeling that I was hoping the movie was going to get me for the buildup that it had gotten. But I like Gore Verbinski, and I appreciated that it was just like a pretty good film, like in terms of just being a sort of drama, thriller, etc. type film, that it was pretty good, you know? And I haven't watched it until the other night again, but I always sort of thought of it as a movie that's just like, good job. Like you did a horror movie that actually feels like a pretty good drama. And it's funny because I feel like it fits in this weird, horror is this genre where we just sort of expect the movies to like actually not be good. Basically, it's like, it's going to be fine. You're going to get some scares, but like the writing's going to be bad. Like everything's going to be bad. Except for these, I don't know, 20 or so elite Alien, Psycho, The Exorcist, The Shining, The Omen, right? Like these are the ones that actually feel like you made a real film that also happens to be a horror film. And The Ring is sort of somewhere in the middle. It's like you have this top tier actor, you know, composer, director, and everything, but it's still kind of just a cheesy horror movie that like it doesn't all work together. The writing's not the best, you know, it's fine, but it just sort of is in this weird middle ground where it's not quite top tier, but it's also not just like a sort of whatever run of the mill B horror movie. And I think that gives it this interesting place in sort of modern horror cinema.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is this weird thing. I was thinking about Shutter Island also, because I feel like that's, you know, the Martin Scorsese version of like, I'm going to take like a B horror movie and do it really well. And for me, it also kind of lands in this weird place where it's not like the greatest movie of all time. I've talked about this, but it like sucks me in and I really enjoy it every time. And this definitely falls into that category for me as well. And one of the things that I think is interesting that maybe helps elevate it beyond like, you know, the lower tier of horror movie, you know, teens, sleepover, blah, 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 is this kind of genre blending thing of, you know, it's a detective story while also being a horror movie. And like you're saying, Trisha, this like investigative journalism aspect of it that I think is a big part of why I enjoy it, because I also don't like horror movies, generally speaking. I
Right.
don't like being
Yeah.
afraid, but I really like going on this like clue finding journey that Naomi Watts' character finds herself in, where she watches the video and that's like the end of the first act, right? But now we've all seen the video and it's all these images that don't make sense. And then kind of the rest of the movie is making sense of those images. And I think that's kind of a cool, like, it seems maybe obvious in retrospect, but I think there could just be a movie where you watch a scary video and then people start dying and it's more about the like dying. But in this movie, it is about uncovering the mystery behind those images and the story of the family and all that stuff. And then once you find out what happened, they do a nice little twist around and we can talk about the ending. But yeah, the sort of genre, the horror detective story thing was really stood out to me this time as a reason why I connect with this movie so much, I think.
There's something really satisfying about the way the movie kind of does this big visual setup with the actual Ring video, where it's just these completely disturbing, unnerving images that don't make any logical sense. But the movie basically proceeds to, if not explain the images, at least like harken back to them at least once throughout. Like every single image in the video, there is some example later, whether it's literally the weird coincidence of a centipede in like the files she's going through,
Right.
or as significant as, you know, like the tree where, you know, by the well where she was killed or whatever. So it's a really satisfying experience to have a movie first present you with like a visual mystery. You know, there's no even like, you know, text associated with it. It's just visual mystique. And then to kind of like slowly pay off those mysterious visuals throughout. There's something, you know, film's a visual medium, and it's a really satisfying experience to have a thing burned into your mind, you know, literally like Samara does, and then to kind of get some sort of like a aha factor when you uncover the thing that image is connected to. So I think it's a really smart design.
Yeah, this movie has an interesting challenge, which is to be a horror movie without a monster or something that is in the closet or could break its hand through the window at any point or whatever. It's all psychological. And so it's like it finds these different ways to scare us, whether it is, like you said, just the centipede, which is sort of a coincidence, or the jump edit cut, which is, you know, it is a moment just made for the audience, right? It's a moment made for the audience to be scared, because this movie kind of has to continue to find these challenging ways of being a horror movie when the actual plot is largely someone looking at papers and trying to figure things out, you know. So you get the horses on the ship, and you get these very just you know, unnerving moments and upsetting moments, but it's all it's done in all these different ways, and that's what sort of makes it interesting, that you're always on your toes, as opposed to if it is a monster movie, like, or a zombie movie or something. Well, the scary thing is that they could be there at any second. But the not scary thing is that is probably the only way you're going to be scared. So you're always prepared for that one thing. Whereas this movie constantly finds new ways of scaring you and keeping you on your toes that you weren't thinking about and you weren't expecting.
You mentioned the horses, and I saw Trisha kind of shake her head. And I think the horses are a great example of, or it's just the horse on the ferry. It's just a deeply disturbing thing. Like, for an animal to kind of go violently crazy and like essentially commit suicide, like, is a very disturbing, unnerving thing. And I think that's where this movie is scary. Is it's not scary in the sense of, you know, alien or slasher scary. It's more in like, oh, this is wrong, or something is not right here, and I don't like it. It's not right.
Well, it's really interesting because you have sort of a rule, tightrope that this movie is kind of walking, or like trying to strike a balance.
Like pirates.
Because there have to be sure. It's just that there have to be enough rules, right? So it's like you watch the video, and then you get the phone call, and then even if you don't pick up the phone call, it doesn't matter, but
Right.
You get the phone call, and then there's 7 days, and like your face will be distorted in all pictures and videos. And so like there are certain things that the movie kind of establishes as rules. But then there are lots of other things that we just don't have any rules about or really like understand their nature, right? So like this isn't even in many ways, it doesn't resolve itself into being a ghost story until very deep in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like no one we don't have an entity that we are tracking, as you're pointing out, Brian. It's not a monster movie or a zombie movie or anything like that. There is no one entity that we are following up until we finally learn about the daughter and finally learn that maybe something happened to her. But for like a long time, even deep into the second act, we're just like, okay, there was this woman out on this island with the lighthouse. She killed herself. But again, it just takes a while to get there. And so the lack of concrete sort of rules or even ideas, I think give it this like creepy texture to it, where it's like, we don't know what killed what's her face at the beginning, Amber Tamblyn. Katie, I guess is the character's name. We don't know what killed her in the opening scene at all. Like, and we saw her TV was staticky.
Right.
Water.
She was mostly scared. There was water on the floor.
There's like a
We don't have any
ripple
idea.
that passed across the reflection of the TV because the entity can be seen as a reflection in TVs that are off sometimes.
Well, the entity for a long time seems like it's just the videotape, which is also weird. Like, how do you fight a videotape? And how does it kill you? I don't know. But again, the lack of like, we don't really understand what's going on means that anything could be dangerous. And I will say that I think that the actual content of the video itself is, as you were pointing out, Alex, masterfully put together to tap into like a lot of common fears. And I would like love, I'm sure there are analyses out there, but I would love to read an analysis by a psychologist as to like, why does this ladder upset us? Why does this image with the mirror freak us out with the white space, right? Like there's an oval mirror over here and then there's white space over here. Why does that bother us? Like there are these things that I think are tapping into like probably really common phobias. We have the centipede. I'm sure there's a really common phobia. It's got too many legs. It moves too fast. The actual image of the centipede.
Phobia means like, unreasonable.
Okay.
Bugs are freaking weird.
Thank you. You're right. Yeah, exactly. But again, they're these deep-seated sort of like primal fears that we really, really don't like. Yeah. And so even though we might intellectually understand there's nothing dangerous about a centipede, nobody still wants to see a centipede anywhere ever. Right. You know what I'm saying? Right. So it's like, I think that's really interesting and fascinating about the content of the video. And again, because we don't understand where the images came from, why they're related to each other, what they mean, it just sort of permeates the whole movie with this psychological unease that I think is hard to pin down and works tremendously to the movie's advantage. If you pinned this down to an entity or made more rules than there are, everyone would just be like, well, now that it's like, can't do it in that hallway because it's a ghost that can't come through there. Like, the audience would be trying to outsmart you constantly. But there's so few rules, you can't outsmart it.
Right. Yeah, it is a really interesting balance, like you're saying. If there are enough rules that I feel like it's not like I feel cheated constantly when weird stuff happens. Right. But yeah, it's still a pretty wide open thing where you can be in a video lab going frame by frame and then you can pick the fly off the screen and I'm like, whoa, that's terrifying. What does that mean? It makes sense, but I hate it. It doesn't look like it does all those things.
It sets up the ending.
It's true.
Right.
That's a very good point.
It's a setup.
World building.
Yeah.
Well, I think what is so interesting about the way the movie like juggles all the rules. I mentioned pirates before because it reminds me of a Gore Verbinski thing almost.
Sure,
like where he's just barely holding together like way too many rules. Because I think this movie, it doesn't have it doesn't have more rules than it needs. Like it has like the bare minimum rules it needs, but it still needs a lot of rules to function. Like it establishes a lot of strange things. Like Samara, she can burn images into different mediums, like overhead projector papers and also VHS tapes, or people's minds, or horses' minds.
Right.
And if you make a copy, like the universe tracks if your fingers hit the record button on the VHS player.
Can I just say also that the creepy shot in this movie is the final shot where you see the kid's fingers like pressing the copy button and like slowly go, like the way his fingers are arched. It has just
I don't even like seeing you do it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting because this movie, it's part of what for me puts it in that category Brian was talking about between like masterpiece and total B movie is. It's just a little bit too unwieldy. Like it's just in the nature of the concept, which is how do you write like a coherent movie around the concept of a VHS tape? If you watch it, it will kill you somehow, and then we're gonna have a whole mystery behind it and a detective story. Necessarily, a lot of strange rules have to come out of that concept to hold the movie together. But to his credit, like he just barely does it. Like somehow this movie does hold together. And the funny thing is, it does require a couple of leaps of logic by the characters. Like I've noticed that, like Naomi Watts, Rachel, who's her character, she like seems to know how ghost stories work, and she seems to know, like in the world of this movie, like when you put a ghost to rest, like the story's over. Like
right.
she seems like very just like certain of this. Like she has concluded the ghost's like story. The body has been exhumed. Mm-hmm. Everything's good now, Aiden. Like we're fine. And so it's just funny how the movie almost has to rely on that at a certain point of like, there's already so many rules. We're just gonna have the characters assume some movie logic here that of course this is a ghost story, and of course once the ghost body is found and you've like acknowledged its suffering, the curse is definitely broken. It's right. Just kind of hilarious.
There's this kind of interesting almost theme happening throughout where like so the moment that sparked this thought for me is when Rachel's playing the tape for Pretty Boy, whatever his name is, Noah. And she goes outside and she's like looking around at all the other people like watching TVs, mm-hmm. and there's
the
kind
rear
of
window moment,
right? Mm-hmm. There's this kind of like quiet gravity to it that to me signals like I'm supposed to get like something thematic from it. And so I was like, all right, movie, I'm going to think about what you're saying. But I couldn't really pull anything out of it other than like, yeah, like people do watch TV. And so ultimately it was like, well, maybe this is just setting up like, look at all the potential victims, right? If this tape is kind of eventually going to be a virus, look at all the potential hosts that it could like infect. Mm-hmm. But even with like, the opening scene, I think, is interesting, where it's trading on, it kind of knows the audience has seen the first scene of a horror movie before. Like we've seen Scream and we know this kind of setup, and the characters, even within the text, are playing games because it's like, I'm going to tell you a scary story, but then I'm going to pretend to be dead and like you're going to. So there is this sort of weird meta like awareness of horror that's happening kind of within the movie, but doesn't feel fully explored to me either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my lesson for later is going to be about theme and sort of horror movies and theme. But I definitely think there is a cohesive element there. It's like the opening conversation with the two girls is like, oh, did you hear that TV does this terrible stuff to you? And then the rear window moment, everyone's got TV on. And then she is an investigative journalist. And Brian Cox says, what's the line? I have it written down somewhere. What is it about reporters? You take one person's tragedy and spread it like sickness. And then that's what Samara is doing. She is taking images and burning them into other people. So ultimately, I agree that it doesn't really do, I think, what it's trying to do. But at the same time, there is definitely cohesion there. There is definitely an attempt to say, like, we are taking this one idea and we're going to kind of put it in all aspects of the movie the way a good theme should.
Yes. And I do think that what you guys are identifying was something that I thought a lot about as I was watching it this time around, too, where I was like, there's a really interesting, like, technological unease that, or a paranoia that this is tapping into from the time. So, keep in mind, this is like a couple of years after the Matrix, right? It's like right at the beginning of like the internet and like the, sort of tech age that we live in now. And I feel like was, sort of plugged into the zeitgeist of that, quite a bit. And I think that thematic undertone is what made this at the time scarier, right? Like it seems like, we've invited this entity, this technology into our house, and like we don't really understand it, and it could be anything, and it could be dangerous, and we don't really know and don't really care, like and we all have one in our homes, and like maybe it's a sinister force, right? It kind of is operating on that level with a degree of paranoia. The issue is, though, there's this whole other side to the movie about like family and parents and kids, right? And like the relationship between parents and kids, right? Because Naomi Watts' character, Rachel, has this bizarro relationship with her creepy son.
Hello, Rachel.
Who calls her by her first name. Like, I mean, he's just like the most generic version of a creepy kid ever. Like, it's a horror movie. She can't have a normal kid. Like, she's gonna have the weirdest child ever.
The performance is great and kind of elevates it. But yes,
well, I feel like what's so like specific about this movie is like he is the most generic creepy kid, but he's like a good generic creepy kid. Like, it's like not a bad generic creepy kid.
No, he's a very good creepy kid. This is all after The Sixth Sense, please keep in mind as well. He's a great creepy kid, and there's this interesting parallel going on, right? Where there's clearly something kind of broken in her relationship with Aiden. And obviously, her family is kind of falling apart. His dad's not around, although he is around. They have that long scene about that.
Right. Our son.
But again,
reveal.
It's a good twist. It's a good twist.
Yeah. I think it adds like a nice, like, it raises the stakes. Sorry, Trisha. Yeah.
No, I just think that doesn't seem really in any way connected to the sort of technology piece. Especially because the family drama that it's echoing apparently took place in the 1960s, but looks like it took place in the 1860s.
Right.
Like,
they're on an island.
I was like, what year is this island from?
that island didn't get genes yet.
Hey guys, Michael here. My partner always talks about how she wished she had a better experience learning science back in school, that how it was taught prevented her from being truly engaged by it. How you learn something can be just as important as what it is you're learning, which is what makes Brilliant so great. Brilliant is an online learning platform for STEM that has a bunch of interactive courses that let you get hands-on. They're all designed by award-winning instructors and built upon the principle of active learning, so you're gaining STEM knowledge by actually doing it. Brilliant is truly awesome, and as further evidence of this, I first heard of it from my partner, who discovered it and fell in love with doing one of their lessons every day. It's the kind of teaching she wishes she could have had back in school. If you want to learn more about Brilliant and help support Beyond the Screenplay, head to brilliant.org/Beyond the Screenplay and sign up for free. Or simply click the link in the show notes. The first 200 people that go to that link will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. Thanks to Brilliant for sponsoring this episode.
On the topic of the former theme, the screen paranoia.
Yeah.
There's something interesting with this movie, which is almost meta about it because of the way
of course
the images of the movie, like in your experience, Trisha, and my experience in the theater, it does burn these unnerving images into your mind. And it almost gets at a paranoia about that, about like, what if you watch something and you can never take it back? Like, what if you see an image you did not want to see and it can never be erased? Like, I think there's something about the permanence of watching this tape and having it burned into you, and now you're like marked for death, that there's something very primal about that I kind of relate to. And I think especially when I was younger, I did have a fear about that. When I was young, I had a fear of like accidentally seeing a really shocking image in like that rated R movie I wasn't supposed to watch, and like would that like I don't know, like ruin me or something?
Like the hand, like Kate Winslet's hand in Titanic.
Yes.
On the car window.
Disturbing, unnatural images.
I think you're really hitting on something there, Alex, because I was the kind of kid who didn't want to have nightmares. Not that I thought they could hurt me, but I just didn't want to see the things that I would see in nightmares that my brain would make up to scare me. And I feel like that goes back. That is like the root of my problem with horror movies, is that I don't want those things in my head. Like my head's already a terrifying enough place. I don't need more scary stuff in my head from the outside being put in there.
Maybe that's my problem, is my head is like too boring. So I want to,
90% Bing Bong.
I think another interesting thing here in terms of the images, the videotape itself, is the timing of this movie. So in 1998, when Ringu came out, VHS was the standard. And in 1991, when the novel came out, VHS was the standard. In 2002, the bad version of this movie is like, it's a DVD and the menu is cursed or whatever, right? Like, which I did appreciate. The ring on DVD after the credits roll and you go back to the menu, you hear a phone ring, which I love. But I think what's cool is that watching, you always watch that movie from like the 1993, The Devil's Own or something. Like you have to hit CLS to clear the screen. You're like, oh God, they're using DOS. That just everything feels so dated and weird. And I think what's cool about a 2002 movie that's about a VHS tape is that 19 years later, it doesn't feel super dated, because at the time a VHS tape was already kind of like a back then thing. It was already falling away a little bit, and that was nice watching it so much later, was that it didn't feel super dated for that reason.
It did strike me though that this is maybe the last moment in history this movie could ever be made, because so much relies on this precise moment in technology, like home phones, VHS tapes, like paper records, like everything is still like just barely analog, but they have cell phones, so it's like the movie relies on this like hybrid moment in technology that doesn't exist really anywhere else.
And then also the fact that the video is grainy and hard to spot things, and like that is creepy, as opposed to like the sort of like pristineness of a DVD or something. Sorry, Michael, you didn't.
No, yeah, just all of this was also on my mind watching it, and that I really want to hear from, maybe we can insert it in our next like film club chat, like young people watching this. Like I'm always fascinated to hear from, but I remember even in the theater at the time watching it and thinking, oh, it's kind of weird that this is a videotape, but of course it has to be a videotape because they couldn't do it like for a DVD. Because like you're saying, Brian, DVDs were a thing. Like The Matrix came out on DVD and it was like, no, you're going to get a DVD player for Christmas and you're going to watch The Matrix and it's going to blow your mind. So yeah, it's just it is this really interesting time in technology, and like you guys were saying, it doesn't feel dated somehow, I think, like for the reasons you're pointing out, Brian. And then to your point also, Alex, about the, kind of being subjected to imagery that you don't want to see. That was one of the things that creeped me out in the theater, even, I remember, of buying into this idea of like, there's a tape, if you watch it, you're going to die. And then the movie shows you the tape. Like,
it makes you watch
really
the whole thing.
Have a choice. Like you can get up and leave maybe. And even the final images of the movie are, the tape, and kind of reminding you, the last
that you have watched
right,
it,
and the last line is like, what's going to happen to the people we show it to, and then it like shows you those images, and it's like, oh, it's me. What's going to happen to me? So there is this. That's part of like that meta thing happening that does make you like invest psychologically in a meta way, almost, of like, I want her to solve this because I've also seen the tape, so I need to understand what is going to happen to me also, or like find a way to like break this, is what I was thinking anyway. It was also nice owning this on DVD. I feel like that gave me a little bit level of like distance to not be too afraid upon rewatches.
Apparently, I read that the VHS version of the movie just starts with the Ring video.
Oh my God.
When you put it in the theater.
What?
Yeah.
I hate that. Well, but I do think it's interesting. I cracked a joke a minute ago about how like the family drama seems like even further back in time. Like they, are on this island that doesn't get like a lot of modern technology. And it seems like every time, Rachel has to go investigate something, she's like almost taking herself further back. Like she's like on this ferry and there's horses. Why would there be horses there, in 2002? But being in like a rural place, which is often a setting for horror movies, often gives you the leeway to remove characters from like modern conveniences and sort of modern comforts and safeties that we have to surround ourselves with, right? Like if you're living in a city, not that there aren't great urban horror movies, but it hits a little different, or like the anxiety usually comes from a different place. Whereas the isolated feeling, or like the isolation piece that horror movies often trade on, you get from being, sort of having to leave your place of comfort, leave your own home, leave your own neighborhood, and usually go to somewhere where there isn't easy access to resources. There's like a psychological thing about being in that space. Same thing with the barn, same thing with the well. I was like, she drowned in a well in the 60s? What was a well doing open? Like...
I like that you think wells and horses are obsolete.
Especially on like a rural island.
Well, I will say they're obsolete in the city in 2002, right? No one's using wells and horses in the city then. These are things, again, they're associated with a lack of access to all the sort of modern conveniences. And so I think it's smart and it's interesting. And on paper, it shouldn't match up with like a videotape, right? Even a videotape or like that kind of something that's not completely cutting edge, as we talked about, but there's like a weird mashup where it's like the woman is combing her hair in a mirror in her farmhouse with her horses, and her daughter she's going to kill her daughter and throw her in a well. And then that ghost made a videotape. Like there's something about that doesn't seem like it makes sense or should be scary. And yet the very nature of that incongruity in terms of like time and place actually creates more of that sort of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Dissonance, cognitive dissonance.
Well, so they even point out at one point when they're analyzing the video, it's like this shot shouldn't be possible, or how is this image even being created? I don't understand. And that's part of the disturbing aspect of the VHS tape. It's like this wasn't made by a camera, so like how can this even exist?
Yeah, good point.
And it is cool that it was made at a time where visual effects were such that you could make some of those images that like couldn't have been made 5 years before. And Gore Verbinski is really good at tech. When I read today that the book came out in 1991, all those things that you're pointing out, Trisha, made a lot more sense, because like VHS was like the new thing that was like the ubiquitous thing. And so the kind of cautionary tale of, like we were saying earlier, you're letting this new thing into your home and everyone's going to be watching it. What if? Like that's is a fresher idea, obviously, then versus when it's kind of already going out the door, and the reaching to earlier time periods is not as far of a reach. So kind of like you were saying, Alex, it's just felt like it came out at the very last moment it could have possibly come out and been accepted.
Which is just a fun, sort of, I guess maybe metaphor for like the American, it's the American system, right? That it was like, this idea was in a book in Japan 11 years ago. We're like, yeah, but we don't know. And they're like, but then it was a movie, but a foreign movie. And then like, once it comes out when VHSs are dead, everyone's like, ooh, what a fresh new idea.
Well, it's interesting where this movie lies in this trend. There's a momentary trend of adapting Japanese horror movies. And this really was the first one. This is like the early 2000s. We took a Japanese horror, kind of cult classic at that moment, and we remade it, and it was really successful. Like it was very successful for the budget they made it for. And then there was a whole bunch of like kind of copycats afterwards. I think The Grudge was the one that I remember seeing like just a couple years later. But there was like another one with Jennifer Connelly called Dark Water. It's a lot of like attempts to kind of recreate this phenomenon of The Ring, including a Ring sequel, which was not good.
And then another Ring sequel recently.
And then one called Rings. Yeah. but this movie it did do an interesting thing where I feel like I don't know that this film would have been as interesting if Gore Verbinski wasn't able to be inspired by another film. You know, if he was just given this script and read this script, I'm not sure if we would have the movie we have today. Because I know that Gore Verbinski actually saw the original movie and was inspired by its kind of avant-garde nature and the imagery in it. And so it's interesting how it's, you know, this is a dumb analogy, but like, you know, you make a copy like the VHS tape copy. There's an interesting thing where like something good was made because it was copied. Like it's almost like Verbinski built upon the first iteration of this project and did his own thing with it. But I don't know if just receiving this script, he would have made this movie without there being a previous vision from a Japanese director doing a really avant-garde, interesting horror movie.
I think it's also, I was thinking about the performances, and obviously like Naomi Watts is always great, and she has to do so many silly things and
silly lines too.
And silly lines.
Very.
And she does so much work. Sometimes she's not even able to save some of it or some of the scenes. And I just I kind of want to vent about them for a moment. But when she first goes to Noah and he's like, yeah, I can use my tech thing to stretch the edge of the frame. And so she's watching him stretch the tape to reveal more of the image. And she's like, yeah. Here, let me do it. And then they start like fighting over it. That's just one of those dumb moments in a movie where I'm like, why? Why would she need to do like that? Makes literally no sense. And then when she was like petting the horse, first of all, it was weird that it was shot from like horse POV. Like that was one of the few like directorial breaks that I had, was like, I don't know that horse POV was the way to do this. But when the horse is like doesn't want you to pet it, like leave.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, there's no motivation there to keep trying to pet this like angry horse.
Yeah.
She really likes horses, I guess.
She really likes horses.
Yeah.
But then also, I think bringing Brian Cox in and having him be the big scary thing is like kind of what helps make the last third of this movie work.
I mean, his suicide scene is maybe the most disturbing scene in the movie.
He's in literally 3 minutes of this movie, if that. And this performance is like, you know, I kept thinking parts of this would come back to me from my drunken self that watched it way back in the day. And all I remembered is Brian Cox's suicide scene. Like literally that was the only thing I remembered about this movie because it was so horrifying and his performance is incredible. Like there's just so much. You know, we talk a lot about in film how characters signal to us how we should feel, right? I think the thing about that sequence that's so terrifying is he is signaling to us like, this is how dangerous she is.
Right.
Like, I can't even, if you showed up here, you have a copy of the tape. Like, I understand what this means. She is never going to rest until she kills me too. So I'm just not going to be part of this anymore. And I'm going to take my life in a very elaborate, but like the worst
so
way.
Many cables.
The worst way.
Like it's a little extra. Exactly. Like you probably didn't need to like
it's so
do
extra.
it like that.
So
but...
like it's so effective. Like Naomi Watts just like screaming and backing out of that room as like sparks are flying. It's such a shocking part of that movie.
But
yes.
And that's also a moment where I was like, but she's being asked to do so much because it's like you just witnessed somebody's horrific suicide and then someone comes and grabs you. Okay, relief, it's Noah. And now you have a great idea about where to go next. Like that all happens in like 30 seconds.
And she pulls it off.
Yeah, she pulls it off enough that I'm like with you and okay, go climb the tallest ladder ever and let's figure this out.
Oh my God.
She also has a great horror movie scream when she turns Noah around, you know, because we've seen the face at the beginning of the movie. So we're expecting the movie to like jump scare us with the face, but instead all we get is her reaction and without like a cut or anything. Like all it is just her turning, seeing and screaming, and it works. And it's just like really chilling.
That's part of the Gore Verbinski effect, I think. You know, there's almost like a tastefulness there to just like leave it on the long shot of her screaming.
I also feel so bad for like NCIS girlfriend that then it's just going to go up the ladder and find
I
Noah.
know. Yeah. That's like the darkest choice Rachel's character makes.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna let you go
intense.
up and find like melted face boyfriend.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry. I'm sure that actor is wonderful in other things, but he does nothing for me in this movie.
Sure.
Like, it's partly, I think, kind of a thankless role. Like, they do try to create some meat to it where he's like, I want to be your dad, but I don't want to be your dad.
He's cool.
And the kid is like,
he's cool, like photography guy in Seattle. It's basically his character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably the character that I bump on more than the performance. But yeah, I guess I'm super confused about what the movie is trying to say to me in terms of her character arc, Rachel's
Right.
character arc, right? Like, they're like, you should listen to kids because kids sometimes get scared and they just draw scary things. And like, you should listen to them. They just want to be heard. But they're evil? Like,
But also kill them.
That's what the twist at the end signifies, right? Where it's like, if it really is, you know, Naomi Watts like reaches this piece where she's like, she just wanted to be heard, and like, I'm gonna just lie in bed with my son, and he's like, don't you have to be at work? And she's like, I don't need to go to work today. And I'm like, oh, you're gonna be a better mom because you helped this girl, and her mom killed her, and she just needed love. She was just an orphan that needed love. And then the creepy kid is like, you shouldn't have helped her.
No, she was just
And I was
evil.
like,
Yeah.
what is the message of this movie? Children that scare you are evil. So what?
So I feel like this can transition into my lesson pretty well.
Sure.
So
Okay.
Real quick
Okay,
though,
great.
I want to say that like part of what's funny, I think, about the boyfriend is there was this weird trend in like late 90s, early 2000s thrillers where Oliver Martinez in Unfaithful, which was also 2002, and Viggo Mortensen in A Perfect Murder, where it was like the like handsome, hunky, thing on the side who lives in a giant loft floor and has like his paintings everywhere and that kind of thing. So I think that that's part of the problem with Noah is like nothing necessarily against him as an actor, but it just feels like a dated character that only existed for this like very short period of time.
Kind of like a Gen X character.
Right.
Very
right.
Gen X.
Yeah.
Yeah, his loft is, oh God. It's great because it provides such a great area for him to die in. And
Right.
like, for me, the
Sure.
scariest.
There's plenty of room for the ghost to like jump forward very quickly and knock over a bookshelf.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the scare that scared me the most in the theater.
Yeah.
So before we go to lessons, just that moment where I felt, and you pointed out, Brian, that the fly coming out of the video does signal that that's possible.
Mhm.
But for some reason, I remember my brain feeling like, well, at least I'm safe, like, because nothing can come out of it. And so when she
Yeah.
reaches and starts coming out of the television and then does that like zap, like I'm coming closer, I remember like jumping and crawling up into my seat. Like that
Yeah.
moment was the most afraid I'd ever been in my life up to that moment.
I feel like that was a great movie theater moment when she
Yes.
actually pierces the television screen.
Right.
There was like
You
an
could
audible
hear-
gasp. Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot that it was like not until the last 5 minutes of the movie that even happens. I thought it was
Right.
something that happens like a couple times in the movie, and I'm watching it like she hasn't come out of the TV yet. I thought that was what this whole movie was. I also appreciate that she still looks like TV when she's out of the
Right.
TV.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there's something cool about
It's
that.
that fun Gore Verbinski effect, like he does go above and beyond with the visuals, and that was just one example of it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'll come back to that because that actually is my lesson.
Okay. Well, so
You were going to your lesson first.
So we were just talking about the ending, and so my lesson is that I think this movie has the structure of a great twist, but there's more kind of thing,
Mhm.
where, as we talked about, the themes are do not maybe resolve into something totally cohesive, and I don't know that Rachel has a character arc exactly like you're pointing out, but I think Noah does have a character arc, and I think that's what kind of helps sell that the movie is over. So like he's kind of wrestling with like, do I want to be this dad or do I not want to be this dad? And then the structurally, as they're like, okay, we got to go back to the cabin. Once they're on that path, you have all the beats where they're in there, but now we're here and we're too late. It's like all hope is lost. We're not going to do it. And then they figure it out, and then it goes to the climax and the whole thing with the well, which is absolutely terrifying.
The TV knocks her in.
The TV knocks her in.
I was like, come on. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That one, it was a bit much.
That's too thematic.
The TV knocked her into the well.
Very like
Yeah.
David Lynch in that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is the moment where like the rules thing of like, what can Samara control and what can't she? Like she
All
can
the nails in the
unscrew
house.
nails and
The nails are cool.
they're cool, but it's just like, if you can do that, then what, like, can't you? Anyway, once she's in the well, it's like, that's a terrible. Anyway, so it has that climax, and then the resolution where, like you were saying earlier, Alex, now she knows that she's completed the ghost story thing.
Right.
And then they're kind of driving home off into the sunset, and the kid wakes up and they're holding hands, and you can tell that Noah's grown, and he's like, okay, I do want to be a father. So it wraps up all the things that you would need to wrap up, generally speaking, for a movie to end, and then has a really tight twist turnaround where the kid says that, you shouldn't have helped her, and he's so alarmed that you're like, what the hell? That's terrifying. And then it goes straight to all of that. So I feel like it's just, if you don't want to do like a Dark Knight style, but there's 60 more minutes of a movie left, if you just want a really fun extra 8 minutes of twist that like leaves you unnerved, I feel like this movie structurally executes that really well. So that's my lesson. Trisha, that sounds like yours is in this ending area also.
Well, I know I've talked about it before, but I just think that image of her crawling out of the TV is super iconic for a reason, right? Like, I didn't see this movie in 2002. I avoided it with every part of my being. However, in 2002, there was no way to avoid that image, right? There was that image, and that idea was everywhere. And everything about it, from like the white dress that she's in, or like her nightgown or whatever she's wearing, to the hair over her face, and then like the way she crawls like out, like she like steps over the rim of the TV and like crawls up to the whatever, and of course they're messing with the timing of it, right, where it's like she's moving preternaturally like fast,
right. And backwards, like they're playing her footage backwards, so it's all creepy.
Yeah, exactly. It's all the most, But the concept of she crawls out of the TV, right, is this really striking idea. And that's, I think, what makes that image so iconic. And so I can't remember what episode it was that I talked about transposing things from where they should be to things where they shouldn't be is often a way to create iconic imagery, or juxtaposing two ordinary things, but in places where they should not be together. So it's like the image of a boy riding a bicycle is not unusual or iconic, but you put that against the backdrop of the moon and the bike is flying. And what you have is an image that you will never, ever forget, and becomes like cinema history. Right. And so,
hold on, Michael, really... that's E.T.
Okay.
Sorry.
The other horror movie. Okay. Yeah.
So I just think that thinking about why that image disturbs us and why it captured the imagination more than any of the other images in this, because I agree. I think the ladder's really scary. I think the centipede is scary. I think the way that the horse dies by falling off the ferry and the water's all bloody is like the worst.
And there's a flash of the ring afterwards, right after that.
Yeah, frame. Tyler Durden's in the center of it.
But none of those have the lasting power that the little girl crawling out of the TV does. And so I think dissecting that just in terms of idea is worthwhile if you're trying to create an iconic image in your own writing. You have to have a payoff that is that good. That's the other thing about this movie, is it doesn't work if it doesn't have a really great payoff, because you've built it up and built it up and built it up. How did she die? What happens? Right. And it's gotta be the last thing that you expect. It's gotta be weird, and it has to be iconic. And so that juxtaposition of ideas that is impossible, it creates this sort of like paradoxical image is really, really strong. And just A+ on that for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I feel like there's the build up to it is so good also, and like as once they're on the island and she's going around, she looks up and sees the window, and it's the image from the video, so like you're starting to see those puzzle pieces come together, and that kind of creates this momentum. And then that image comes after it's been essentially confirmed that she is evil also. Like I feel like there's just the image itself, like you're saying, is just so striking and has all that meaning already, and then the story around it like really makes it like extra disturbing. And I think kind of like I was talking about, the sort of the faux ending would have been a fine ending, but it wouldn't be memorable. Like I think you're really hitting on something where, like,
exactly,
without this final like this is the thing that makes The Ring like, oh my god.
Yes, because The Sixth Sense, has a we help the ghosts and then they don't hurt us anymore ending, and the creepy kid is fine now and everything's fine now. And The Sixth Sense has a lot of really great memorable images in other places and really cool ideas in it in other places as well, but it really doesn't have that slam bang ending that leaves you with that final shock in the theater that this movie does.
But The Sixth Sense also shows, we talked about this in The Fifth Element, like just one image or one thing. So I see dead people, crawling out of the TV, Lilu in her costume. Like there is just a power to, we're going to create one moment / image / thing that is going to be the one thing people never forget from this movie. It's pretty cool.
Which is probably impossible to predict and create. You can do your best to try to see what works, but
I mean, this seems like it was pretty consciously engineered, as we're saying, like they saved this image until the last. It would probably be just as scary if it was the midpoint of the movie. But the fact that it's like the last couple minutes of the movie is.
Yeah, that is the really smart choice, because it'd be so lame to think about this movie as a typical slasher flick where there's other supporting characters that watched the video a few days earlier, and we get early kills of them and we see how they die. That would be a totally different experience. But this movie, you think it's over, and then you get the real, like the one big movie kill actually happens on screen.
Right.
So it's very, very smart choice to do that.
Yeah. Awesome. Brian, what's your lesson?
So I mentioned the theme, and I think that horror for me, the reason I sort of put it into these two, like put the genre into these two, like it's either one of the best or it's just bleh. I think theme is a huge part of that. And I think it's I would say it's ironic, Trisha, that you don't like horror, because I feel like it is one of the genres where theme is the most visible. You've talked about sci-fi being a really good genre for that too. But I feel like when you look at some of the best horror movies, Night of the Living Dead, zombies, look, they're consumers. This is a response to consumerism in 1968. 28 Days Later, what's worse, people infected with rage or people who can actually choose to be awful and horrible and use you however they want to use you? The Babadook is about like motherhood and dealing with your inner demons, right? So it's like, obviously Jordan Peele is doing this now with movies like Get Out. It's the horror thing, the thing that we are scared of, is also the theme, the thing that we are like actually dealing with, the characters actually dealing with, they are trying to get through. So, and that's almost why I think The Ring is sort of in this middle ground, because it's not a B horror movie with just no theme at all, right? Like kids on spring break, and then the slasher comes and kills them all. And like one of them survives for a while and then dies at the end, but they get the killer, but then under the porch, the hand comes out of the dirt, whatever. Like it just means nothing. Right. Yeah. And then you have these classic movies that all feel like they are actually about something while also being a horror movie. And The Ring is kind of in the middle. This TV rots your brain. It takes your humanity. It actually kills you. As you said, Alex, what if you could watch something that permanently damages you. Like that is an actual psychological problem that we deal with, especially in the early days of the internet, where you can watch like a horrible video that you can't get out of your head for weeks, you know? And then of course the ending of this is the way that they get out of it is by making copies, making other people watch these images. You know? So it's not a do and it's not a don't, my lesson, but it is sort of, The Ring is right in the middle there, where it does do the horror movie theme thing, where it is trying to meditate on this thing. It could do it better. It could do it in a little bit more of a clear way, as you were saying, Michael. It's not perfect, but it is a good example of at least a movie that is trying to do it. And then I think there are movies that do it better. But I always get excited when I realize that a horror movie especially is actually doing a theme thing, because I feel like it's such an obvious and like just good medium to say, I have an idea and the thing I want to talk about is actually what the horror in this movie is. And then you're good to go. Like that's all you need, right? To then go make your movie.
I believe you. I'm glad you like horror movies.
I will tell you about some movies.
No need.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I feel like there's like ideas and like to create a cool like backdrop for movies. And then I think there's like theme built into like a character arc that is being expressed. And I feel like horror movies are really great avenues for like ideas, like to like you're saying, Brian, have all these things where what if we expressed consumerism as like zombies? That's horrifying. And now you can just make a zombie movie, but like that's their creating extra meaning for it. And so it is kind of this, like you're saying, a cool, unique thing about the horror genre and how it can explore meaning in a different way while also, being a fun popcorn movie that you, throw your popcorn in the air all the time when you get scared.
Right. A Quiet Place, a movie about a family that doesn't communicate and then they can't make you know what I mean? Like things like that. There's just so many good examples of like, like if you are trying to get better acquainted with theme, I think and you don't hate horror movies, like it's a good genre to go see movies that are just like 1 and 1 make 2 kind of thing.
Right. And I think that's a great example of it has those ideas and it has a theme. Like you're saying, it's really strong and visible because the choices the characters make at the end like resolve the theme and like that's a really good example. Awesome. Alex,
I just want to talk about the music for a moment because we haven't even touched on the music, but this is Hans Zimmer and Gore Verbinski went on to collaborate more in the future on the second and third Pirates movies, but this is just a really cool score for a horror movie. I mean, it's you can hear the Hans Zimmer cello focused just really interesting soundtrack for once again what like could have been more of like a B movie script. Honestly, you've got this really elevated visual style, really elevated music, and I think to me the lesson is there are some movies where the music can be almost better than the movie is, or like be like kind of beyond the movie, and it can help push the movie out of one category into another category. Like music can be that powerful, and to me, without the music that this movie has, I don't know if I would love it as much as I do. If it had a totally different soundtrack, if it was kind of like a blah generic horror movie soundtrack that was just kind of run of the mill, just have music for the jump scares, but if you didn't have that Hans Zimmer theme creating the underlying mood and the general sense of dread, or like the kind of Seattle rainy sadness, I don't know if I would love watching this movie. But because of that music, I actually really enjoy simmering in the mood of this film. So don't underestimate music to like push your maybe not masterpiece movie into like the middle ground territory we've been talking about.
I did not hear one note of this score.
It's a great score.
I was too scared.
It is.
I
really
didn't
great.
hear any of it.
She watched it just with subtitles to be safe.
Yeah, well, I definitely did have my subtitles on, which I often do when we're, watching a movie we're going to podcast about, just so I make sure I catch the dialogue. But
I do think in an unconscious way, the score is part of why
exactly my point.
Why this movie makes our skin crawl, is that there is a feeling that I get watching this movie that it's like getting under my skin. And I think the sound design of the music is at least 50% of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that you're right.
I'm thinking about it now. Yeah, I think you're totally right. And we talked about this a little bit in Psycho too, of how the music can just elevate things. There's kind of like famous stories about different movies where people watch a cut without the final score, Star Wars being one. And they're like, oh God, this movie is bad. And then like you slap some John Williams on there and it's the greatest movie ever, etc.
Right.
Yeah.
The score also, as soon as the movie started, I haven't seen it in a long time, but as soon as that theme came in, I did get that like the tingle and that mood like you're talking about. And it kind of reminds me of the theme of Are You Afraid of the Dark? If you guys remember that a little bit.
I don't remember the theme.
Okay, well,
I
I
remember
remember
the Midnight
avoiding
Society.
watching that show.
Ryan Gosling's in it kind of once. Anyway, yes, music, obviously sound and
Dream
horror
typewriters.
and all that is really important. And so good score, especially for this, is very important. What have you guys been watching? I'm going to eeny, meeny, miny, Brian.
Hi. Well, speaking of East Asian movies that had American remakes, I watched Old Boy for the first time.
Oh,
Nice.
Yeah, the 2003 Korean film directed by Park Chan-wook. And it's just this insane movie that's insane, but like really well made and fun. The plot is this sort of crappy dude is kidnapped and kept in a room for 15 years. And then he's let go and he's hell-bent on figuring out why, like who did it, why they did it. It's going to get revenge and all this kind of thing. So it's like a mystery revenge thriller. And it is insane is the only word I can think of. It is not for the faint of heart. It is a full-on hard R kind of movie. And it goes to just totally bonkers places in terms of what is happening and how it's happening and et cetera. But it's one of these movies where I'm like, it's like one of the like 100 best movies of all time on like a bunch of lists. And I'm like, it's really well made, but it's also just so weird. But I had a really good time with it. And then I was like, do I just want to watch the same story again, but directed by Spike Lee? And I was like, I kind of do. I don't care if the remake isn't really well regarded. And I had a lot of fun with it, actually. It's sort of unnecessary and it's not better at all. It's not as good, but I enjoyed it. Although I will warn, kids, I know you love the MCU, but this movie starring Josh Brolin, Elizabeth Olsen, Sam Jackson, and Palm Clemente, not for all ages, maybe just because you like them as their MCU characters. So yeah, if you only watch one, watch the original for sure. But I genuinely like watched the remake either the same day or the next day after watching the original. And I was like, you know what? Sure. Why not? It was fun. It was weird. It did some of the same stuff, but in new, interesting ways. It did stuff that was different, that was cool. It did stuff that was different, that was not cool, but why not?
Nice. Just thinking about, because we just talked about Psycho. Psycho had a remake also. Like,
You're
yeah,
right.
They should just remake all the movies. Like, Trisha, don't you want like a No Country for Old Men remake? By like,
troll.
Wow.
I'm not going to name any names. Awesome. Cool. Trisha, what have you been watching?
So I decided to catch a heist movie that I had not yet seen. Apparently there are a few. So I watched 1972 film called The Hot Rock with Robert Redford.
The Hot Rock.
The Hot Rock. And directed by Peter Yates, written with screenplay by William Goldman,
Nice.
who, is one of the greatest ever, based on a Donald E. Westlake novel. Anyway, this is a like very 70s goofy heist thing where I'm not gonna spoil too much of it, but basically it's like they do a heist, they steal a diamond, which is the hot rock, and they do a heist, they steal the diamond, and through a series of a comedy of errors, they lose it, but like they don't get caught, but they like lose it, the diamond. And so, but where it ends up is somewhere even more secure. So they have to like go and get it again. and like do another heist and steal it again, and then they lose it again, and then it like ends up even somewhere more secure, and they have to like go and try to steal it like a third time. It's really funny. William Goldman's script is really hilarious. Robert Redford is great in it. So yeah, if you just like a goofy 70s heist movie, then The Hot Rock is a really good one. I'm glad I finally caught it. There's a moment in the movie, I will not spoil anything about it, but there's a moment in the movie that involves the phrase Afghanistan banana stand.
There's always money in the Afghanistan banana stand.
No, it's just they like kind of use it as a code word. I won't say more than that, but like I'm literally just gonna start saying it to anybody from now on. If you know, then Afghanistan banana stand to you.
Fascinating.
Yep.
Great. Okay. The Hot Rock.
That's
Alex,
a Trisha movie.
Yep. Alex,
I am
what
your
have you
dad.
yes, Alex, what have you been watching?
So I walked to my local art house theater and I saw the Palme d'Or winning French movie Titane. Is that how you say it?
Oh yeah.
I did not like it. I could not recommend it. I found it to be truly just it just kind of the most irritating kind of like, this is just all for shock value. And like that, because of that, it's art. And like we tricked everybody into like giving us all the awards because it's just so shocking and so grotesque. I am down for that kind of movie usually. I'm usually down for an A24 weird art house experience if it like does something, if it holds together and gives me like a whole, like a something at the end that's like, that was all for something. And I just like, for the life of me, could not get that out of this movie. I just was uncomfortable and offended and grossed out and but it's the French like submission to the Academy Awards this year. So I tried. I'm usually very open-minded. It's really hard for me to recommend this movie, even though it apparently is like belle of the ball right now. So that was my, what am I watching this week?
Wow.
Okay.
Alex,
I
let's go
appreciate
see.
that frank review.
Yeah. We should go see Lamb together.
I'm open to Lamb as well.
You guys let us know how it is.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to like Lamb more than I like Titane.
Yeah.
Excellent. Cool. So I watched, it's been a little while actually since I watched it, but I haven't mentioned it yet. But the miniseries Unbelievable on Netflix. And so it's a kind of, it's a crime story based on like a true case and like a series of things. It's the cast is cool. Like it's Toni Collette and Merritt Weaver, who I love. She's so good.
Yeah, she's great.
And Caitlin Dever, I think you say
Dever,
her name. And so it's this story that, well, like all the performances are really, really great. And it's based on true story stuff. And it's like, it's one of those things where every episode is just like, something really bad happened to this person. And then things got worse. And then things kept getting worse. And so it's not like the most fun watch. By the end, it kind of goes more into detective story-y stuff. So I like wouldn't necessarily recommend it if you're like, I want a fun, happy thing. But if you're in the mood for like, this is a disturbing portrayal about how the system punishes people that have horrific things happen to them unfairly, and it's all women. This is a very good execution of that, and the performances, like I said, are really good. By the end, you do have this really like deep connection with them, and by the end, I was very glad that I watched it. So I would say like it is worth watching, but I'm often not I'm not the Alex that's like, I'm willing to feel bad if it all means something. It's like, I don't like feeling bad if I don't have to. But it wasn't worth it in this case. So Unbelievable on Netflix. Okay. Well, this has been our conversation about The Ring. This was fun to revisit. I haven't seen it in a long time. And it was
Not fun.
We won't make you do it again for a while, probably. but I felt like it was a good like Halloween movie. Like I feel like it's a good October spooky thing. We're
Trisha, you can listen to the soundtrack now and have all the memories come flooding back.
Yeah, good idea. I'm gonna go watch like Nightmare Before Christmas or an appropriate spooky movie. That's also delightful.
Yes. Awesome. Well, we want to say a big thank you as always to the patrons that make this show possible. Thank you to all of us who joined us for this live recording. Quick reminder that we're going to hang out with you guys for a few minutes after we finish up here, so stick around. If you want to join our community over on Patreon, we would love to have you. The link is in the show notes. Also, a reminder that we're doing a week-by-week patron-exclusive series on the Apple TV Plus show Foundation, and our discussion of episode 6 will be releasing soon. Thank you to our producer, Vince Major. I'm Michael Tucker, and I've been joined today by Trisha Rand, Ryan Bittner, and Alex Calleros. All of our Twitter handles are in the show notes. Send us a tweet and say hi. And as far as the next episode goes, if you can get yourself safely to a theater, boot up that HBO Max, whatever you got to do, because next week we'll be back with our episode on Dune.
Woohoo.
We'll see you then.
That's weird to hear.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Here we come.
Okay, no, that's really scary, actually.
What if Brian just came out of your screen?
Oh my God.
I've been like, this door right here, I've been like watching it so much in my screen. I'm like, if anybody wanted to play the worst joke on me of all time.
Black wig
there's
in front of their face.
Oh my God.